With his confiscated rifle brought into the room, Bob proves his innocence using a demonstration with Nick. While handling the weapon in front of a nervous panel, he explains his rifle will not trigger appropriately because he swaps out the firing pins with non-operational ones whenever he leaves home, rendering it useless. The movie begins on a mountainside in Eritrea, an area away from the U.S. Army Camp Lemonnier in Ethiopia. Force Recon Sniper Gunnery Sergeant Bob Lee Swagger and his spotter, Corporal Donnie Fenn, perch themselves at a camouflaging spot during what they assume to be a peacekeeping mission. After eliminating an enemy vehicle and some enemy targets, they prepare to leave the scene when an army of hostiles appears, tailing Sector Bravo. They open fire at the American soldiers, though Bob's sharp sniper skills eliminate many enemies as possible. Unfortunately, heavy artillery starts flooding the area with explosive fire, forcing them to leave their position and request immediate extraction. Their hopes of rescue fail as the commanding CIA leader orders the support team to cut off all communication lines and abandon them. Donnie is killed when a militia helicopter shoots down on the two soldiers. Frustrated by the lack of action from his government, Bob fires a few shots to take down the enemy helicopter and disappears. 3 years pass, as Bob retires in a log cabin with his dog, Sam, isolated somewhere in the mountains of Wyoming. Elsewhere, at a private military organization in Langley, Virginia, retired U.S. Army Colonel Isaac Johnson and his associates, Payne and Dobler, review Bob's file, paying close attention to his skills. They visit Bob one afternoon, though he is apprehensive since he has not been active in duty for a long time. Colonel Johnson speaks with him privately in his lodge to disclose a sensitive mission involving an attempt on the president's life, which is based on intel they recently uncovered. Due to his expertise in counterintelligence affairs, the colonel believes he is the perfect choice to sniff out the shooter's points of interest across the United States, where the president will be hosting events. Initially hesitant, Bob wants to mull it over but becomes enthused when the colonel leaves the information and contacts him should he return to duty. Over the next few days, he prepares himself for the mission, testing the distance it would take for a sniper rifle shot to reach the president. Before leaving his home, he stocks his rifles in his workshop and calls a friend to look after his dog. Eventually, Bob travels to different states, determining where and how the assassination attempt will likely be made. Deducing the location in Philadelphia, he meets with Johnson's team to explain the technicalities and precautions to take to stop the shot. Johnson is thrilled by his efforts and offers to come to the event so he can work as their spotter. The day arrives as Bob accompanies the colonel and his team to an undisclosed area set up by a local police officer. They monitor the situation below, taking note of the stage where the president and his guest, Ethiopian Archbishop Desmond Mutombo, will be speaking. As Bob warns them to take action immediately and stop the president from going on stage, the local cop shoots him. In contrast, a rifle perched elsewhere shoots down at the event, killing the archbishop. Bob falls off the window and tries to escape, despite badly injuring himself. Johnson's team clear out while planting the former soldier's rifle and ammunition in the room to frame him for the crime. Bob runs away from the scene, reluctantly incapacitating rookie FBI agent Nick Memphis while telling him he is innocent. He then steals his vehicle and drives off as police mobiles and FBI units scatter and search for him. The quick-thinking soldier enters an automated car wash to hide while he gets on the back seat to grab first aid essentials and patch his wounds. Afterward, he returns to the streets, and another long car chase ensues until he gets pinned near the river. Visibly surrounded by law enforcement, Bob puts the car in reverse and forcibly drowns it in the river. At the same time, he escapes, hitching a ride on the side of a barge. He makes it to the other side of the river and hotwires a rugged van to drive past the police. News of the assassination attempt plays on the TV as FBI agents, including Nick, see Bob positively identified through surveillance cameras. Later, the rookie agent is brought before FBI agent Howard Purnell for his embarrassing performance during the incident. He defends himself, saying that Bob had told him he was set up. Still, the FBI official asks him to disregard the information since he is possibly misremembering details. As night falls, Bob goes to a local grocery but kills the power in the store so that the shopkeeper will not see his face while buying supplies. Faced with limited time and resources, he trespasses inside a mechanic shop to steal tools that help him construct a makeshift IV unit to administer nourishing fluids, helping him temporarily. Back in the FBI headquarters, Nick gets an urgent phone call from the shopkeeper about her suspicions that Bob appeared in her store. He shares the information with colleague agent Russ Turner, recognizing the former soldier is treating his wounds using an unorthodox method from hundreds of years ago. Despite not being taken seriously, Nick continues to study the evidence the night, believing there are inconsistencies between the bullet's trajectory and the report's findings. The following day, he shares his initial theories with agent Lourdes Galindo, who discloses that the local cop who shot Bob was killed in an alley, implying that loose ends were tied up. Meanwhile, after disguising himself as a mechanic, Bob travels to Keene City, Kentucky, to locate Donnie's widow, Sarah Fenn. The surprised young lady is initially hesitant to let him inside, having seen the assassination news. Still, Bob insists he would not come all this way to lie to her, knowing he and Donnie were best friends. As he parks his truck in the garage, she attempts to call the police but hangs up midway, rethinking her decision when Bob walks in. She tells him about receiving his letter about Donnie's untimely death, including the flowers he sent once a year to comfort her. She starts to believe in his story, though she informs Bob that the president is safe while the archbishop took the bullet. As his injuries weaken him, he pleads with Sarah to buy a list of supplies and stitch him up. Though not skilled at medical work, she uses simple embroidery techniques to help him seal the wound. At the same time, he induces himself to sleep with the nitrous oxide inside whipped cream sprays. Elsewhere, Nick inspects each point of interest surrounding the area of the incident. He then measures the floor area at a local church's steeple and discovers tripod marks embedded in the wood paneling. He heads inside an internet cafe to relay his findings to an unknown weapons expert in a chat room. He is sent a video that explains the proper use of automated tactical precision rifles, ultimately deducing that someone else remotely operated the crime scene's rifle instead of Bob. Back in Sarah's house, Bob wakes up, finding out the operation was a success while also being told his dog, Sam, was euthanized, thinking he will not return to his property anymore. Despite grieving for her dead husband for 3 years, he becomes grateful to Sarah for all her help. Determined to clear his name, he asks Sarah to meet with Agent Nick to pass on information about the setup. Before preparing his plan, she gives him Donnie's old hunting rifle to protect himself. Bob accepts the blame for his colleague's death, though she angrily tells him not to rehash old wounds now that she has been adjusting to her life without him. They embrace and start having feelings for each other. The following day, Sarah arrives at a local cafe and meets Nick in disguise. As the soldier surveils the area, she gives the agent Bob's vehicle information and plate number so that he will attract attention from Johnson's private security organization once he runs them through the FBI's system. As Nick leaves, 2 police officers approach Bob and request an ID. As he refuses, he punches one of the officers and forces him to get bitten by the attacked dog before knocking out the other to steal the police radio. Later, after Nick attempts to run the plates in the database, he asks awry to help since his clearance level is restricted from accessing the information. Though reluctant, she reveals that the Oscar is the only one capable of getting a Delta clearance and that the tapes of the event were heavily edited by an unknown agency. Meanwhile, Johnson and his team become fully aware of the rookie agent's interference with their affairs, as the colonel promises to take care of it. Later, Nick is kidnapped at a bridge and brought to an undisclosed marina to be beaten senselessly for information about Bob. Since he is unwilling to cooperate, he is placed on a metal contraption that will forcibly make him shoot himself in the head. Shots are fired from all over the place, killing all the agents. Bob slowly walks toward Nick and frees him, though the agent is displeased for acting as bait to fish out the thugs. He asks Bob to prove his innocence legally. Still, the soldier is aware that there are corrupt powers at play who can spread their operation in a couple of years while evading the law entirely. Feeling that he has jeopardized his position in the FBI, Nick agrees to help Bob in his plot for revenge. Meanwhile, Johnson and his colleagues find out about Sarah due to discovering she is sent flowers every year by Bob. Johnson is willing to use her as leverage and instructs Payne to take a jet, fly over to Kentucky, and kidnap her. Elsewhere, Bob and Nick drive to travel to Tennessee to meet Mr. Raitt, a firearms expert. He tells the men that through a technique called paper patching, it is possible for a bullet to be fired from one rifle but made to appear like it came out from another. Bob realizes the round came from a can of stew he fired it during a practice session a week before the assassination. The expert also reveals that only one other sniper still alive today can pull off a trick like that besides Bob. He is given the name Mikhail Shcherbiak, whose description matches the wheelchair-bound colleague of Johnson, Michael Shandor. Nick then calls awry for her to dig up more information about Sandor's past, including the house in Virginia he currently resides. Elsewhere, Johnson anticipates this and orders Shandor to act as bait for Bob. He then drives to Washington to meet Senator Charles Meacham, who orders him to arrange the kill team from the Ethiopia job to kill Bob. Back in Kentucky, Johnson's men break into Sarah's home. Despite killing one of them with her shotgun, Payne captures her. The next day in Virginia, Bob and Nick, who he trained as his spotter, prepare to assault the estate of Shandor. They eliminate each of the contractors guarding the home. After Bob enters the house and corners Shandor, he is informed that Johnson has been working closely for Senator Meacham, who leads a corporation that exploits economic assets, particularly in developing countries such as Ethiopia. As their conversation deepens, the kill team sent by Johnson slowly approaches the area. The remorseful Shandor adds that the Archbishop was the intended target of the assassination due to aversion to the atrocities committed in his country Ethiopia by the private organization, like purging a whole local village to make way for an oil pipeline. Bob is horrified when he discovers he unwittingly provided cover to the killers of the villagers during his mission in Eritrea years ago. After revealing Sarah had been abducted, Shandor shoots himself in the head. Bob starts fighting back at the soldiers as Nick activates their trap pipe bombs and the napalm. After sniping the other remaining soldiers, Bob escapes the estate and rendezvous with Nick. Unfortunately, a helicopter arrives, shooting them down, as memories of Eritrea flood Bob's mind. The duo then fled the scene while being chased. Nick runs toward the field, attempting to get the helicopter off course, while Bob shoots the gas tank to bring it down. After escaping to Montana, Bob arranges a meeting with Johnson and Senator Meacham in the snowy mountains of Montana while also letting Nick tip off the FBI. Bob offers the colonel a deal to take Sarah back in exchange for Sandor's taped confession about the massacre in Ethiopia. The next day, the corrupt officials arrive at the meeting spot first, along with a captive, Sarah. A hooded man, assumed to be Bob, appears in the distance and walks slowly to the area. Suddenly, a hidden sniper team shoots him, and he falls to the snow. Fortunately, this is a ruse concocted by Bob, as the man shot down is actually Nick wearing a metal covering under his jacket. After Bob shoots down all the snipers and kills Payne, he unbinds Sarah while Nick disarms the officials. Simultaneously, the FBI receives a letter from Nick detailing the encounter, so they immediately head out to fly over the location. Afterward, an angry Sarah takes one of the pistols and shoots Payne's corpse repeatedly before Bob stops to comfort her. He turns his attention to Senator Meacham, who offers him a job while reminding him that his corruption runs deep in the political system. Realizing that the taped recording will only get him killed, Bob decides to burn it. The senator and Johnson boast their temporary victory as the FBI arrives to arrest Bob. Much later, Bob is permitted to defend himself in a private meeting with Attorney General Russert, FBI personnel, and Colonel Johnson, who is reluctant to join in the discussion. With his confiscated rifle brought into the room, Bob proves his innocence using a demonstration with Nick. While handling the weapon in front of a nervous panel, he explains his rifle will not trigger appropriately because he swaps out the firing pins with non-operational ones whenever he leaves home, rendering it useless. Despite the evidence proving Bob's innocence, Colonel Johnson is adamant the blame will not extend to his reach. Nick then reveals photographs to the Attorney General, showing him the massacre in Ethiopia carried out by the Colonel's organization. Though an overwhelmingly vile act towards African minorities, Russert cannot charge Johnson or Meacham for crimes outside the American jurisdiction. As the Colonel leaves, he brushes off Bob, claiming another victory for himself. The Attorney General releases the former soldier and leaves him thinking that extrajudicial means may be required to quell corruption. Since Bob is unsatisfied with the verdict, he thinks about a way to take revenge. Sometime later, at the corrupt senator's mountain cabin, he, Dobler, and Johnson are in high spirits, celebrating their escape from the law and bragging about spinning the truth their way. While consuming drinks, he instructs Johnson to undergo another mission involving a local uprising in Ecuador, which the colonel believes is solvable. Suddenly, a guard falls from the balcony, and bullets start firing outside the perimeter, killing Johnson. Bob appears at the doorway, shooting the remaining escorts before killing a remorseful Dobler. Senator Meacham angrily reminds him about his authority, knowing it would be damaging for him to kill a United States senator in cold blood. Nevertheless, Bob shoots him point blank and leaves his gun near Johnson's hand, making it appear he is the culprit. Before leaving, he destroys the gas valve, igniting the house on fire until it explodes. The movie ends in the morning. Bob hikes a few miles down the road, where Sarah is waiting for him in a car. With the revenge plot a success, they drive away back to town, hoping to start a new life together as a couple. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.